Good morning. My name is Sanaz Okobat. I'm the Associate Vice President for Research and Chief Compliance Officer at UTD. I'm happy to welcome you to the Office of Research Spring Forum. This program allows the Office of Research staff to engage with you, our research and innovation community. We have quite the lineup for you today, covering various topics from internal awards and foreign influence to patents and human subjects research. Without further ado, please allow me to turn over the virtual mic to our session moderator. Thank you again for spending a part of your morning with us.
Thank you, Sanaz. Our first speaker is Dr. Lloyd Lumada. Lloyd Lumada obtained his BS in physics at Western Mindanao State University, Philippines in 2002. He went to graduate school at Florida State University in 2004, wherein he studied nuclear magnetic resonance of organic conductors under the supervision of Professor James Brooks at the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory. He earned his PhD in condensed matter physics at Florida State University in 2008. In 2009, he moved to Dallas for a postdoc position at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. At UTSW, he assembled an MRI signal enhancing instrumentation called hyperpolarizer that amplifies the MRI signals by an increase of 10,000-fold. This machine was used for high-resolution cardiac and cancer imaging. In 2014, he moved to the neighboring University of Texas at Dallas as a faculty in the Department of Physics, where he is now an associate professor, leading a research group that applies this hyperpolarization technology for non-invasive diagnostic assessment of cancer. The title of Dr. Lumada's talk is Internal Awards, Tales from the Trenches. Dr. Lumada, the virtual platform is yours.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for the introduction and also for acknowledgement to the Office of Research for organizing this forum. So today I'm going to talk to you about my experience as a recipient of 2 internal awards, which are actually seed grants from the University of Texas at Dallas. And just a quick background, I'm doing biomedical physics and specifically using this relatively new technology in which we enhance MRI signals by at least 10,000-fold. So this 2 awards that I'm going to briefly discuss today is this is a part of the National Research University Fund that UT Dallas received, having attained the Tier 1 status as stated in the state Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. And the first award that I got back in 2019 is called COBRA, which is Collaborative Biomedical Research Award. And this is a collaboration between UT Dallas and UT Southwestern Medical Center. And actually the purpose of this grant is to foster collaboration between these 2 institutions. And it was an easy transition for me because I did a postdoc at UT Southwestern. And this COBRA award is quite helpful in our goal to attain an NIH R01 type of grants. And this is still an ongoing grant that I have. So the advantages of this grant is that we got to test a new idea. And we don't even have to have preliminary data. And that's the good thing about the COBRA award. The other thing about this is that there is a brevity of the application materials. We only got to submit like 2 pages of proposal. And it is a quick turnaround. Like within 2 months, we get the notice of the award. So I think during that time, there were about more than 20 applications and UTD awarded 3 COBRA grants. And this type of grant is really beneficial to my group, and I'm pretty sure to my collaborator as well, because this is something that both institutions contribute, and we get to test a relatively new, untested idea, and with the funding that was given relatively rapidly. And our target there is to get funding from the NIH for R1. We also submitted a couple of NSF grants that is currently in the review. And another target that we have is we're going to submit grants to the congressionally directed medical research program of the Department of Defense, and also CPRIT, the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas. So this type of grant is, I think it's a 2-year grant, and it has been very helpful so far. We have so many offshoots of data in which even data that were a little bit, far, a little bit remote from what we intended it to be. So it is very helpful to get preliminary data for this type of grant. The second award that I got last year, actually in 2020, is called Spire. And Spire is it's an interdisciplinary research enhancement award. And this one, this is a proposal that I did with Warren Gu from chemistry. This seed grant is called a Seed Program for Interdisciplinary Research. And the goal of this grant is to get preliminary data, seed data, within 1 year. And the goal is to apply for external funding, just like COBRA. The advantages of this grant, and especially for new PIs on campus, is that it has a fast turnaround. It is also a grant that encourages collaboration. You gotta have a co-PI that's outside your department, and I like this. This is an interdisciplinary research, and you don't have to have preliminary data. So if you're a new PI on campus, I highly encourage you to apply to this Spire Award Seed Grant from UTD. And actually, there is one on the horizon. It's due at the end of this month. So if you're watching this and a new PI, I encourage you to apply to this. So a few tips regarding grant writing. I've been here in UTD for 7 years, and so far I have acquired $1.4 million in external funding. My experience as a PI, not new anymore, I was just recently promoted to associate professor, is that if you need help in grant writing, seek help, talk to your senior colleagues, for example. And that's what I did. And UTD actually has examples of grants, of different funding agencies. They have this list of examples of grants in which you can look at the format and, especially the funded grants. So seek help and then collaborate. Whenever I write grants, I always make sure that, I get the right people in there. And I'm also a recipient of a lot of rejected grants, but, I learned from them. So just be persistent. If it's rejected on the first round, just look at the comments and try to improve it and send it again. And most important is write the grants, because if you don't write, you have 0 chance of getting the grant. And lastly, and this is a struggle for me, try not to procrastinate, writing it on the last hour or so. Start early if you can, and writing these grants, following this, it will increase your chances of getting such external funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lumada. Next up, we have Conor Wakeman. Conor is joining us to discuss foreign influence in research. Conor has worked in the Office of Research Integrity and Outreach since 2011. He oversees the university's conflicts of interest and commitment and export control programs. Conor lives in Allen, Texas with his family and enjoys reading and playing board games in his free time. Welcome, Conor.
Thank you, Tiffany, for that introduction. So I'm here today to give you a very brief introduction to foreign influence and how that relates to researchers, especially funded researchers here at UT Dallas. So I'm going to give you a very brief introduction or definition of, what do we mean when we say foreign influence related to research? Who at UTD may be vulnerable to undue foreign influence? What are the specific risks that we're worried about related to foreign influence? What are the proactive steps that you can take to protect yourself from the appearance or being targeted, by a foreign nation state? And what is the action that you should take if you believe you have been targeted or suffered some kind of loss, from foreign influence? So, in terms of a definition of foreign influence, it's really a multi-layered program that's being led by the U.S. government to counteract efforts by foreign nation states to disrupt or to obtain access to U.S. research, the results of that research, whether that's research data or patentable or protectable intellectual property, and to use that the research, the results of those research without the consent or the approval of the person or the organization or the funding agency that created that, engaged in that research or funded that research. And so this is something that the Department of Justice, as well as the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation and other major U.S. Federal funding agencies are involved in, and they're asking companies and universities, and in some cases directing companies and universities who are receiving funding from these agencies to take steps to identify and mitigate the effects of foreign influence on the research activities that are being supported by that agency at the institution. And the rationale for these kinds of programs and taking these steps to protect our research is that unfortunately there are foreign nation states who do not value the ethical conduct of research and believe that they don't need to play by the same rules and follow the same transparency and accountability that U.S. research enterprise follows and has become the mainstay of the hallmark of our all of our research activities. And so in order to preserve not only the potential commercialization or other dissemination of the results of our research, but also the economic value of the funding to the university of important research data that you would collect and use to get other federal funding or to attract students or to attract faculty to the university. We have to take steps to identify potential undue influence. And then if we believe there is a risk to mitigate it. So researchers at the university who might be vulnerable to undue influence are those with significant foreign relationships. And there are a couple different ways you may have a significant foreign relationship. So that would be if you rely on a foreign collaborator or a foreign institution to perform key aspects of your UTD research. So that might be whether that's federally funded or not. If you have foreign co-authors, or if you have data that's being collected by a academic institution or a company that's outside of the United States, that would be considered, and you're using that information to meet your federal funding obligations, that would be a significant, foreign collaborator. If you're developing technology of interest to a foreign nation state, which right now would be something like you're working in artificial intelligence or quantum computing, you may be vulnerable to being targeted by a foreign nation state for them to obtain the results of your research, without your consent. And a third category would be those receiving significant federal funding for cutting edge medical or military research. And again, those are high value research areas that foreign nation states have said, we would like to, take the lead in these areas, and we don't really care whether that's through funding our own research or illegally obtaining results conducted in the United States or in Europe or outside of our country. So the risks that we're really concerned with when it comes to foreign influence are theft of UTD intellectual property and confidential information. Because the value of that intellectual property would be lost. We would lose the ability to control access to it, to obtain patents, as well as confidential information about our grant funding and from our grant proposal. So that would allow another institution to say perform the same research or obtain funding in another from another funding agency using the information that we were using to obtain funding from the federal government. Another risk would be the compromising the integrity of our research data or other sensitive data we're using to perform research, because we need to be able to trust the information that we have, and we need collaborators and the general public and other people interested in the results of our research to be able to trust the information we're using to generate our research results. And then the sort of downstream effect of that would be that if we are targeted and the integrity of our data, of our research operations are compromised, we would potentially lose government funding, and that would affect our ability, again, to attract students, to retain faculty, to obtain future federal funding. So in terms of the steps that you can take to mitigate the risk of being unduly influenced, would be, one, to make sure you report your foreign research support to UTD and to your funding agencies. And if you have questions about, okay, I have these particular relationships, how do I report them? Please reach out to my office, coi@utdallas.edu, and we can help you to figure out what is your reporting obligations. When you are specifically requesting federal funding, make sure to identify any performance sites for your research project that will take place outside of the United States, and any collaborations that will be important to your performance of that research that would involve foreign collaborations. And then the third step you can take is to request approval for foreign affiliations and appointments from the university, because when you do that, when you tell us, hey, I have this visiting faculty member appointment at this institution, we can walk you through the steps of identifying, hey, are there any obligations you've accepted that might conflict with UTD policy or with your federal funding obligations? Are you engaged in the kinds of activities that your federal sponsors would want to know about, so that we can make sure that you report that relationship and the resources to which you have access to your federal sponsors. Because really, right now, federal sponsors want researchers to be transparent with them about where research is being conducted, who's involved in the research that, and the data collection that is being done to meet our federal obligations. And then lastly, if you believe you have been targeted or have suffered a security incident where you have data that's been lost or that has been compromised, you should immediately report that to infosecurity@utdallas.edu. The information security team will take the lead on collecting information, analyzing the incident, and will involve the Office of Research to ensure that any obligations, reporting obligations, have been met to any sponsors of the research that may have been impacted by that incident. Proactively, you can also contact myself or your department if you have questions about engaging in foreign relationships, about reporting them, about what it could mean for you or your research, or if you are if you have a new relationship that's requested by a new foreign collaborator. We're happy to walk through the steps of, okay, what would this look like? What could be the potential risks to you? Do we have any concerns about a particular institution? And then lastly, you can think about, what are my valuable research assets? What are the research relationships that are really important? What is the data sets that I have collected and that I'm using across multiple research programs? What is the technology I developed that I really don't want anyone else to have access to, or that I want to say who has access to that information or that technology? And then you can reach out to my team, and we will help you to come up with a plan for how can you safeguard those assets and make sure that they aren't used or disseminated without your permission. Even if you intend to publish those results eventually, we need to be able to say that the information, the technology you've created is what we say that it is, and that it can be trusted. So if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about, or just conflict of interest at commitment generally, please feel free to reach out to my office at coi@utdallas.edu. We're happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor. Our next presenter is Emily Lacy. Emily Lacy, Associate Director, Sponsored Projects, has been at UTD for 10 years. Prior to UTD, she spent 5 years in the Central Research Office and 1 year in the Corporate and Foundation Relations Office at University of North Texas. Emily will answer the question, why do I have to pay IDC, during her presentation. Thank you for joining us today, Emily.
Thank you, Tiffany. So yes, my topic is why do I have to pay IDC? Which first we need to talk about what exactly is IDC and what are the rates. So IDC is the acronym for indirect costs. You might also hear it referred to as facilities and administrative costs, or F&A, and those are synonymous. You can use whichever word you want to. Normally, in my office, we use IDC. And so what are IDC? IDC are costs that are important for the project and are necessary for the project, but you can't say exactly how much is being used for the project. They're not directly attributable. And so the best example I can give is electricity. You have to have electricity to do your project. You have to have electricity in your lab in order to conduct your experiments. Your computer has to have electricity in order to function. And so that is necessary for the project, but how are you supposed to say exactly how much electricity you are using for the project? And trying to do that would be overly administrative burdensome, and it would just take too much of your time and it wouldn't ever be accurate. And so what the federal government did is they decided that they would do federally negotiated rates with most universities, and they would try to calculate what that rate is based on your specific university. And so there are different agencies that negotiate the rates. For us, it's the Department of Health and Human Services, the DHHS, and we just completed our most recent negotiation. And so these rates go into effect as of September 1st of 2021. And the rates are in the table below. So everything that's research and on campus is 56%. Instruction that's on campus is 51.3%. And anything that is not instruction or research will be at 26%, as well as anything that's off campus. So I'm going to go a little bit into detail about what is the difference between on and off campus and research and instruction. So what is on campus? On campus is anything that is at the UTD facilities. So that would be everything at the Richardson location. That would also include CBH and CVL in Dallas and the Collier Center in Dallas. All of that is on campus. It doesn't matter if it's not housed directly at Richardson. It could be any of those. And off campus would be anything else. One of the examples I can give for that is the geosciences group. They do a lot of off-campus research because they are studying erosion and soil and sediment and things like that. And so they sometimes go out to West Texas or Nevada, and they are out there for an extended period of time doing the majority of their research. And so the key there is majority. Where is the majority of the project taking place? If the majority is on campus, you use the on-campus rate. If the majority is off campus, you use the off-campus rate. So now we'll talk about the research, instruction, and other. So research is research. You should have a hypothesis. You should be doing a project where you are trying to solve something. There is an analysis, there's computation, there's publications. All of that is part of the research project. Instruction is you're teaching somebody, and that is simply that. Instruction. Other sponsored activities would be anything that doesn't fit those two categories. So like public service, if you're doing something for the public good, but you're not necessarily researching it, you're just doing it for the public good, then that would be the other sponsored activity. And I will say that probably 92% of the projects that we do here at UTD are at the 56% research for on campus. That is the majority of what we do. All right, so the next slide will give us some examples of what exactly is IDC. And if you remember, facilities administrative is one of the phrases that is used, and majority of this fits that category. So everybody on this call today is an IDC. We are an IDC cost, everybody in the Office of Research. It's everybody, all that is in support of research. You need us in order to do your project, but you can't say exactly how much of our time is being used. It's also the security, and that's InfoSec, that's OIT, that's your computer network. Sometimes some of the projects require your own environment on the computer, and so that's an additional resource that goes into the F&A cost. We have the janitorial staff, the landscaping, the libraries, accounting and payroll. You need to receive your paycheck. You need finance in order to send invoices and to bill the sponsor. Then we have the utilities, which was the electricity, but also the air, the water, the biosafety stuff, the vivarium, the IRB, the IACOOK, all of that in our core facilities. It's all part of IDC. That is all that's encompassed. So it's anything that you need, but you can't necessarily say how much of it you're using. All right, so we can go to the next slide, which will talk about what happens to the IDC that's collected. So here at UTD, we give 10% back to the PI of the project. And this is different from a lot of universities. Most universities do not give any back to the PI, so this is a benefit to being at UTD. The way that we return it is it generally goes back to the PI. Now that can be split between PIs and co-PIs if that's what's desired, but our general course is to give it to the PI. There are a couple of things to remember about this. We term it research enhancement. So these are research enhancement funds that will come back into a specific account set up for this purpose. And the cost will be distributed after the first of the fiscal year. So our fiscal year starts in September. So these funds will be deposited into September or October timeframe, and they will also be on a full year fiscal delay. So the reason for that is because this is return on IDC, and so the expense has to hit the project. We want to make sure that that expense is going to stay on the project, that it's not going to be reallocated somewhere, or that an auditor or the sponsor isn't going to come back and say, no, you can't charge that. So we want to make sure that those expenses are on the project and are staying on the project, and then we can return the IDC that resulted from them. And so it will be on a full fiscal year delay, but then those funds will arrive. And then they can be used for anything related to your research. They're basically unrestricted research funds at that point. So what happens to the other 90%? And that's kind of up to leadership. It goes back into the facilities and administrative costs. All those things that were listed on the previous slide, the funds will go back towards those things. We also use them to fund our cost share commitments. The main ones for that are like the Department of Energy. Almost all their projects require a 30% cost share. And then we have the NSF MRI, which requires a 30% cost share. So it's things like that. But it mainly goes back into all of those items that we listed on the previous slide as to how we can further our research enterprise, because these resulted from research funds. So they go back into the research infrastructure, if you will, and all that goes with it. And so that pretty much sums it up. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Tiffany.
Thank you, Emily. Joining us now is Marvin Young. Marvin has worked in various roles of technology creation, development, and management most of his career. He has held leadership positions at large companies and startup companies, primarily in optical telecommunications, and is an inventor on at least 17 issued patents. Marvin managed intellectual property portfolios within the various technology organizations for which he worked. He later became a registered patent agent with the USPTO and worked with a patent law firm for about 9 years, where he drafted and prosecuted several hundred patent applications. He also started up and operated his own services-oriented business in DFW relating to building science. Marvin joined UT Dallas Office of Technology Commercialization in 2018, where he is currently responsible for working with inventors, outside counsel, and licensees to evaluate, protect, and commercialize intellectual property developed in UTD research. Marvin received his PhD in physics from the University of Arkansas in 1987 in the field of quantum optics and laser physics. In his spare time, Marvin has remodeled several homes, enjoys working with home automation networks, and enjoys mechanical work, restoration of automobiles and tractors. He also enjoys traveling, hiking, and generally enjoying nature. The title of Marvin's talk is Light Bulb Moment. Let's protect it. Marvin, welcome.
Thank you, Tiffany. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about what happens when you have those ideas, those light bulb moments, if you like, where you just have a gut feeling that this idea is going to make a significant difference in your field, or even more importantly, make a significant difference in people's lives. So how do we protect it? So what are the next steps? So I'm going to spend a few moments talking about how we evaluate it, and then kind of two levels of protection: how we protect it legally, and then how we protect the value of it, which is a little bit broader than just the legal protection. So first of all, we have to figure out what it is and evaluate it. And to do that, we need you to contact our office when you have one of these ideas and have one of these light bulb moments. It's always a good thing to even call us before you file an invention disclosure, but at least talk to us and then file an invention disclosure. And then what happens next is that we will seek to understand the points of novelty of that invention. We'll try to dig in and figure out what the core of the invention is, where it's different than the prior art. We'll understand the prior art. We'll do a prior art search. We have tools internally that we use, as well as using outside firms and outside counsel to help us understand the landscape of your invention and figure out where it fits in and how we can claim it. Our goal in this part of the process in the initial evaluation is to determine if it's patentable or not. Is it patent eligible, for example? Patent eligibility, I'll just speak just a second on that. You know, if it's easier to talk about what isn't eligible. Abstract ideas are not eligible. If you've just simply found a new way of describing nature or understanding nature, that's unlikely to be patentable. If you've are describing you know, if it's a mental process that you can carry out in your mind, that's probably not patentable, which may include some algorithms. Not all algorithms are not patentable. Some are, depending on what the output of that algorithm is and what it's connected to. Organizing human activity is another one that's typically not eligible, but everything else is. And so, but we will have a look at that first, and then we'll look at novelty. Is there anyone else that's done something, you know, almost exactly what you've done? Has it been published? And we'll look at that in the prior art. We'll also look at what's called obviousness, and that is where, you know, maybe there's 3 or 4 different articles or publications that describe different aspects that are getting close to your invention, but not exactly describing them. But if you put all of those all of those references together, they might suggest your invention. We usually won't not go forward with an application because of obviousness, but we'll certainly assess our risk of patentability when we look at obviousness. And the last thing is enablement. Enablement is just simply, does it work or not? In the physical sciences, that's usually pretty straightforward. In the life sciences, it's usually not so straightforward. Does it work for its intended use? For example, a drug. It may take much more work than what's done in our labs to figure out if it's actually going to work for its intended use. So enablement is, does it work? And then talk for a moment about a different light bulb moment. I get calls sometimes from PIs who realize that they just got a review back from from the journal that their paper's been accepted, and they suddenly realize that they haven't contacted the Office of Research about this idea, and they get the light bulb moment that I better contact the Office of Research about this idea because it's about to publish. So hopefully you don't wait that long, because the process I just described earlier is very important in order to strengthen the patent application. If we want to put together a strong patent application that is protectable and protects the value, then we do want to go through the process. But nonetheless, I'm a patent agent, and Robert McMinn, my colleague, is also a patent agent, and if we need to, we can file a provisional patent application quickly if there's an impending publication. So timing is everything on publication. There's a 1-year patent bar in the US, so you have 1 year to file a patent application from the time that your work was published. For a US patent, there's an immediate patent bar for most of the rest of the world. So if you've published it, it's unlikely you can get an international patent application on that. So let's talk a little bit about legally protecting it. So under patent law, here's the process we would walk through. First of all, to legally protect it, you don't want to disclose it before before it's protected. And so use non-disclosure agreements, especially prior to any publication events, giving talks, working, even collaborating with colleagues. If you've got sensitive ideas that you're sharing with colleagues, you might want to consider sharing under a non-disclosure agreement. Of course, public presentations, you want to do this before that, and then or before patent filing. And then once we have evaluated it and decide to move forward, we'll file usually a provisional U.S. patent application. Like I said, we can do this in-house, or we'll sometimes use outside counsel. Provisional U.S. patent expires 1 year from its filing date. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money. It's a pretty easy way to get the process started and gives us some time to evaluate it further. A year from then, we file a non-provisional patent application, assuming that it's passed muster and we feel like it has some value and worth spending some money on, or there's even a licensee involved at that point. That patent application will typically take 3 to 5 years to get through the process in the USPTO, and it expires in 20 years from the filing date of that application. It costs considerably more money, on the order of $8,000 to $15,000, for example, depending on the type of application. If it's international, it'll cost quite a bit more than that. And then there are maintenance costs and cost of continuing the patents as you move on, and then those continuation patents are also good for up to 20 years. The goal of this process, this patent process, and I haven't gone into any details of that, obviously today I don't have time for that, but the goal of it, the most important thing here, is to find a licensee who will really provide that further protection, that deeper level of protection. They'll develop it into a product that's safe and usable for society, and they'll further protect it as well, which I'll talk about in the next slide, and commercialize it. So moving forward, so this is again protecting the value, or protecting it for public use, if you like. Let's back up to just one more detail about the patent itself. What is a patent? So a patent provides a legal right to exclude others from making or selling it. Okay, whatever it is what is actually claimed in the application. So the claims, the actual words in the claims and what they spell out defines what the invention is. When you have to exclude, when it gives you the right to exclude others, so that brings us into the concept of infringement and others that infringe the claims in your patent. In order to prove, in order to sue someone for infringement, you have to have significant proof that they've done so. And how you set up the claims and how you make those claims can make it easy or very difficult to provide that proof. Typically, claims are in two categories. They're usually either apparatus claims, which are devices and compositions of matter and so forth. Things that are easy to see, easy to be tested, they're provable. Methods, such as process steps, manufacturing steps, control algorithms, steps in programs and so forth, oftentimes aren't so easy to prove. They're done behind the scenes. So a lot of times what we'll look for, even in that initial process, is the process, if we're going to claim a method, is that process or method detectable? If it's detectable, then it's easier to prove, and the patent has more value. It has, and the fact that the patent has more value allows it to be commercialized. Again, what we're trying to do is find a licensee, and licensees need to be able to have an enticing value proposition. So another thing that we work together on to create value around this patent and to protect it is to create a good value proposition. So we work with the inventors, and we work with potential licensees and investors and investment community to figure out the value proposition and bring a licensee in. Licensee then will attract further investment and then build a business around it. It takes work and effort and money. they will then be responsible to enforce the patent to protect our investment and to protect their investment that they've made in our work, in our research, and in our patentable invention. So then they're the ones that would file infringement suits, for example, and work to build a hedge around that patent. And then finally, another way that a licensee will create more value and protect it further is that they need a freedom to operate by the nature of their business itself. If they're going to make money and make money so that it can be commercialized and made safe and usable for society, then they're going to need freedom to operate, freedom to practice the invention. So that involves protecting themselves against some other companies or other individuals filing infringement lawsuits against them or other means. So what they'll do is sometimes create deals with other companies. They'll exchange patents and licenses with other companies in order to set up a situation where they can, in fact, develop a business around it. Again, that's something the university doesn't do. So we need licensees in order to do that. And in order to get licensees, we need to create good value propositions and have good interactions, which involve our inventors. It's a process that we all do together. The inventors, we work with the inventors to, first of all, define the invention and understand thoroughly what it is so that we can make a strong patent application and get a strong patent issued that has value, so that it can be licensed. We use outside counsel to help us do that. We have a lot of resources at our disposal through UT system as well. And then, of course, a lot of times there are industry sponsors that sometimes become licensees, sometimes they don't, but they can also be involved in strengthening our patent applications and our work. Of course, in the sponsored research agreements, a lot of times we spell out exactly how the IP is to be shared with them and utilized by them. So this is what we do. We want to make sure we protect it and work together to do so. That's all I have.
Thank you, Marvin. Our next speaker is Amanda Boone. Amanda Boone is currently a director in the Office of Research, Integrity, and Outreach at the University of Texas at Dallas and has worked in research administration for over 17 years. Currently, her work focuses on oversight of human subjects protections, but Amanda previously held positions in the offices of sponsored projects and research contracts. She holds a master's in fine arts in creative writing. Amanda will cover the topic, My Human Subjects Are Closer Than 6 Feet. Thank you for joining us today, Amanda.
Thank you, Tiffany. The human subjects research in the last year has been a little challenging, and we have several safety protocols in place that we've been able to put together. And so this presentation is really for those investigators who are looking to resume their in-person procedures, resume their studies, or perhaps even submit new applications for new studies. So of course, on Tuesday, we did get some news from the governor's office where they are lifting the mask mandate and opening everything up 100%. However, we are still going to continue the safety protocols. It is the best way to make sure that we are protecting those participants, protecting the investigators as well, until we get closer to that herd immunity and more people are able to get those vaccinations. Of course, always first and foremost, our preference is if it can be virtual, it should be virtual. If there are aspects of the study that can be virtual, whether the entire thing, maybe you can do it over a Teams meeting or through email, that would be preferable. If for whatever reason the study involves something that you really do need that in-person experience, then that would be the social distancing, and that's the second. So You could have those hybrid studies where part of it is virtual. You reduce the amount of actual in-person contact that you have with that individual when you bring them onto campus. But if they do come onto campus, if you're able to social distance, please do so, the social distancing. We also have those, we understand that there are those procedures that do need to kind of break that social distancing, and it's not something that can be maintained for the entire experiment. And for those, you want to limit the amount that you are in that close proximity with that human subject, and just kind of limit it to that exposure that you need to have. So the very first thing you want to do when you are doing that in person, or when you want to resume that in-person procedures, is submit a modification. Move all the stuff that you can to a virtual platform, but kind of outline how you're going to kind of start up that safety protocol. We do have guidance of the IRB office, and we do actually have several guidance documents on our website. And I think Tiffany is going to share that website address in our chat today. Part of that is actually a step-by-step. It's got screenshots of how to actually submit that modification in Cayuse. And there are some specific steps that need to be taken, especially if you're doing that in-person research. And so please refer to that guidance or contact the IRB office, because there are some specific steps that need to be taken. Once you submit that IRB modification, part of that is going to be your safety protocols. You're going to want to outline that. You're going to want to justify the in-person part of it, why that's necessary, why you have to bring people in. And you're also going to want to justify why social distancing can't be done. Perfectly logical for certain procedures. You know, you're doing MRI, you're doing EEG, completely understandable. Part of that safety protocol is going to be the PPE that you will have. And it does depend on the sort of level of research that you're doing, the risk level involved. If you're doing the in-person, but you can social distance, a face mask is fine. It's the same face mask that you might use to go to the grocery store, kind of thing. If you are doing in person, but you cannot maintain that social distance, you'll want a little bit, you want a medical grade face mask, not those N95s, but a medical grade face mask for that. So there are different levels. And again, one of the guidance documents on the website does outline all of these. It outlines the pre-checks for participants, the post-checks, the type of PPE that would be useful to include, as well as other safety measures such as disinfecting and that type of thing. It's a lot to take in. So if you have any questions, again, reach out. Another thing that's important to do is the COVID testing program. And that was at first, it was limited to human subjects research. That has since expanded to all people that are coming onto campus on a regular basis. So if you are on campus, you can get that COVID test. If you're doing human subjects research, I do recommend that you get 2 tests per week, just because once you get that, you do need a negative result before you can resume those in-person procedures. Once you get that negative result, then you can, it's good for 1 week. So if I get a negative result on a Tuesday, then I'm good to run in-person procedures until Monday night. However, it can sometimes take up to 36 hours to get those negative test results. So if you do 2 tests in a week, then that just ensures that you don't have to have that a lapse in when you are able to actually run participants. We do ask that you continue to do your daily health checks for every single person that's coming on campus. So please continue to do that. And then there's that communication with the participant. What are you going to expect to experience when you come onto campus? How are we going to run this now during this pandemic? And that type of thing. There's pre-checks that you do, just like the daily health checks that the investigators do. You're going to want to do that with your participants. And then there's post checks as well. You know, hey, I'm checking in 5 days, 10 days after, just to make sure that there's no change in your health, because if you leave our campus and then experience some of that COVID or test positive for COVID, we'd like to know that kind of thing. And then, of course, I've said it a few times, contact our office if you have any questions, because this is a lot of information I'm just kind of dumping on you. And don't forget, numbers are going down, and we've been going through this for a really long time, and I know we're all really tired of all of the safety stuff that we're having to do. But don't forget that your on-campus actions can really affect the stuff that you're doing here on campus. If you get a negative test result, you're not going to be able to be in contact with human participants until you go through the quarantine process and all of that fun stuff that you have to do after you test positive for COVID. And then you're going to still have to get a negative test result after that. So just know if you're going to places, restaurants, bars, parties where there's lots of people that aren't in your little COVID bubble at home, and you're not able to social distance, it's not very well disinfected, all of that stuff. If you do get COVID-19, you might not be able to do human subject research. So just know that. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Amanda. Returning to the virtual platform to share PI portal tips and tricks is Emily Lacy.
All right, so thank you for welcoming me back. So I'm going to go through a couple of tips for using the OR portal, and you should see the OR portal now. This is where the Office of Research houses our kind of homegrown systems. And so you can see that there are funding opportunities, there's the IRB, conflict of interest, and then funding proposals. What I'll be focusing on is the funding opportunities piece right here. The funding proposals piece is, this is if you have already decided to submit a proposal or you are negotiating a contract. This is what has taken place of our cert form, which used to be in Adobe and Excel, and now we have transitioned it to an online portal. But I'm going to focus right over here on the funding opportunities. So we have Pivot, which is our database that we have a license to, and that has all of the opportunities available from basically across the world. And it is a great resource, and this is not meant to replace it, but this is for some other areas that we have to do some more specifications for UTD. So if you'll notice, there are some menu items right here. There are also menu items up the top that are the exact same thing. So whichever you're comfortable with, you can use. So I'm just going to click on all opportunities, which takes us to everything that is in the portal. And you can filter it by two different types. So the type is the type of application. So if it's just a regular run-of-the-mill NSF proposal, like right here, or if you wanted to limit it to the limited submissions or the internal funding, which is our seed grants that Dr. Lumada talked about earlier. You can also limit it by the audience. So if you are a grad student or a postdoc or a young investigator, then you can limit it that way as well. So we're going to use this one as our example. So as you can see, the audience right here is for faculty. This one down here is for a postdoc, but this will tell you who the sponsor is. And if you click on the external link, it takes you to the actual solicitation opportunity. If we go back, we can see that it gives you a kind of a snapshot right here, but if you click on view opportunity details, it takes you into much more. Now, obviously, this does not include the entire solicitation, but we try and include the information that will help you determine if it's something that is of interest to you. We'll also add any types of eligibility requirements, like if you have to be an assistant professor, that would be listed here. Or if you have to, have so many days past your, or so many years past your PhD, we can do that. So I'm going to go back to the opportunities. And then here's the deadline. And this is the sponsor deadline. And this one is due in December, yet they've already come out with it. So that's fabulous. What we'll go to next is the limited submission. So limited submissions are opportunities that have a limit on how many proposals can be submitted by the university. This is not by the faculty member, this is by the university. So in this case, this one is the NRT program from NSF. And you can see now there are two deadlines listed here. So the first one is the internal deadline, and this is the one that you need to pay attention to because you have to submit your letter of intent to be one of our applicants by this deadline. The sponsor deadline is the external deadline. So that one will matter if you are selected as our person who is the selected individual, which, as you can see on this one, the deadline is already passed, and we did have one person apply, and so she was already selected, but we can't have another one. We only got one applicant, and sometimes we just don't have anybody else who's interested in it. This is a fairly large program, so it makes sense that we would only have one. If you do, however, have one, we're going to use this next one as the example. This one had the deadline passed, but nobody applied for it. If you find one like that where you're like, I like this, but I missed the internal deadline, you can still contact me, and we can see if you have the time to do it and if it fits in with the mission of the university, and then we can just go ahead and modify this and select you as the applicant. But just contact me if the opportunity has passed. So these are the limited submissions. So now let's go to the seed grants, which is the internal funding option. And so the CentIQ has already passed. So the deadline has already passed, and you can see that 11 people have applied. Once we select the awardees, they'll be listed underneath, just like we had on the other one where it said selected Dr. Thrasingham. So I'm going to scroll down to one that has not passed yet, and that will be the Texas one, which is due on March 31st. So if you notice, a new button hasn't appeared, and that's the apply button. So if you click on that, it's the same for the limited submission. It will have you, it's going to have me log in. Hang on. We will log in, and then it takes you to the actual piece where you have to include your information. So you put your title, you change it to whatever school you're in. This is where you can put a short abstract, and then you can actually drop your file in here, which is your actual letter of intent, which should not be more than 2 pages. And then your name will be here as the principal investigator, and then you just hit submit, and that puts it in my queue. And then the system will send me an email the next day after the deadline. So on April 1st, I'm going to get an email saying I need to select a winner for this program. And then I'll log in, and we will notify you if you are the winner. But it works the same for the limited submission. It's the same kind of input right here where you would put the same type of information in. So the last thing I wanted to show you on the opportunities is the audience. So the young investigators are the people. What we identify as a young investigator is anyone who is an assistant professor or who has where the solicitation has a limit on what your role is, or there's so many years past your PhD, or a certain age group. Like I saw one today that was anybody who was under 38 years old. That'll generally be a young investigator. And so the portal is geared towards young investigators because we want to give them as many opportunities to get their research off the ground and provide them with all types of opportunities to submit, whether it be foundation, not necessarily to go for like an NIH R01 at the first step. And so there are a lot more opportunities in here for young investigators than there are for any type of like mid-career faculty. But you can filter by that, and as you'll see, this one is listed for faculty and young investigators, so there can be multiple ones on there. And so the portal, while it's not meant to replace Pivot, it can have some things in it that Pivot doesn't have. Like we get, as the central office, we have a lot of foundations or companies that send us announcements directly to us. And if I feel it's broadly disseminable, then I'll send it out through my PI listserv. But if it's not, then we'll put it in the portal in the hopes that somebody will see it. And so you should check out the portal just because there might be things in there that aren't necessarily available on Pivot. And it's just another resource you can use. It also might help you if you just want to search the limited submissions. You might see something that's of interest to you. You never know what you'll find. And I think that's about sums it up. So I will turn it back over to Tiffany.
Audience, we do thank you for attending the Office of Research Spring Forum. And for additional information and a full list of Office of Research programs, visit research.utdallas.edu. And with no questions in the queue, I want to thank Dr. Lumada, Emily, Conor, Amanda, and Marvin for sharing your time and talent with the university community. Have a nice day.